Drunk and unsteady, 125-pound Scott Hudgens held up the sock a Hamilton County corrections officer had ordered him to remove.
Oh, you mother... Are you serious? Oh, man!
Hudgens says he had never seen the recorded beating he received at the Justice Center 2 years ago until we showed it to him.
They did that to me?
They did that to you?
I mean, a 100-pound guy, drunk? Them dudes need to be... them people need to be fired.
No one was fired. The 9 on Your Side I-Team discovered the Hudgens incident as part of a 5-month-long I-Team investigation of discipline in the Hamilton County Sheriff's Office. Our investigation reviewed video recordings of use of force incidents, audio recordings of interviews with witnesses, and an examination of roughly 2,000 documents, including personnel files, internal affairs investigations, and disciplinary actions in the Sheriff's Office. Records obtained by the I-Team show the Sheriff's Office had disciplined 14 current officers for violating the use of force policy since Sheriff Neal took office in 2013. 4 of them were suspended. 3 officers received written reprimands. 7 officers got counseling letters, the lowest level of discipline. Last year, an internal investigation determined Corrections Officer Randall Spence used excessive force when he punched an inmate in the face after the inmate was already under control. The bloodied inmate later told the I-Team that he received a broken nose and busted tooth. Spence received a counseling letter.
No one would tell me what happened.
In the case of Scott Hudgens, officers reported that he was verbally abusive, threatened them, and threw his sock at an officer. An internal investigation concluded the officer who smacked him across the face did not violate the use of force policy, but the punch thrown by Corrections Officer Sanford Spate was excessive force because Hudgens was already under control when Spate hit him. Spate was suspended for 15 days. The disciplinary action filed in Spate's personnel file 5 months later reported that Hudgens was not injured.
I was not injured. I was knocked plumb out.
The Internal Affairs investigation report also noted that Hudgens wasn't hurt, even though a medical report included in the internal investigation revealed Hudgens was cut and bruised.
I think I got hurt pretty good.
When excessive force is used, it's critically important to hold the officers accountable.
The I-Team shared our findings with civil rights attorney Al Gerhardstein. He did not represent anyone identified in the incidents mentioned in this story. But Gerhardstein has represented clients in 3 federal lawsuits filed against Sheriff Neal and the officers in those unrelated incidents involving use of force.
There's very, very low-level discipline for what appears to be some very, very serious matters.
The I-Team also provided the records we obtained from the Sheriff's Office to Christine Cole, the Vice President and Executive Director of the Crime and Justice Institute in Boston. She is a nationally recognized expert on law enforcement best practices.
I was able to look at a videotape.
That video, recorded at the Justice Center 9 months ago, shows Corrections Officer Jason Mize pushing a 61-year-old inmate headfirst into a concrete half wall. An internal affairs investigator described the victim as frail. Mize, on the other hand, was praised by supervisors for, quote, looking good in his uniform and for being extremely fit. After the inmate fell, Mize slammed the cell door so hard it didn't close. Then he left the inmate moaning on the floor of the cell. Records show the inmate was bleeding profusely from his head and had a broken hip. He was treated by a nurse and taken to the hospital.
It looks as if it's a pretty egregious use of force case.
The internal investigation determined Mize lied about the incident and used excessive force. Internal records show Major Charmaine McGuffey, the commander of the Court and Jail Services Division, wanted Mize arrested and fired. It was the 4th time the Sheriff's Office determined Mize had violated the policy involving force. In 2008, the Sheriff's Office determined Mize was too aggressive when he punched an inmate in the face. Mize received a counseling letter. 2 months later, he was laid off. Former Sheriff Simon Lease recalled Mize in March 2011. In 2012, records show Mize violated use of force policy again. A lieutenant mentioned Mize's patterns that were cause for concern, but Mize still received another counseling letter. In 2013, after Neal became sheriff, records show Mize hit an inmate with 6 to 7 knee strikes, including several to his head, injuring the inmate. Mize was suspended for 3 days.
The agency has a responsibility to deal with these things in a consistent, predictable, timely fashion, and I don't think they've lived up to their responsibility.
The sheriff's office referred the 2016 pushing incident to the Hamilton County Prosecutor's Office, but prosecutors declined to present the case to a grand jury. Mize resigned on February 25th.
I wonder why my face hurt. I wonder why my ribs hurt. You know, no one would tell me.
For victims of excessive force, the most basic question is why.
I did not do nothing to deserve that. I handed a sock to the man.
Sheriff Neal declined to be interviewed for our report. In a statement, he said, "We take all disciplinary matters very seriously, and we feel we reach the appropriate level of discipline." The sheriff's office says former corrections officer Jason Mize was in the discipline process when he resigned. Mize did not respond to requests for a comment. The prosecutor's office also declined to comment on why it didn't present evidence to a grand jury on the most recent incident involving Mize. The officers found to be in violation of Sheriff Neal's use of force policy referred us to an attorney who also declined to comment on their cases.
Whenever you're ready, you may begin. Count your first step as 1.
It was one of Samuel Hickey's biggest tests.
You can stop.
Police reports show Hickey, a Hamilton County Sheriff's Office enforcement officer, ran a red light, hit a car in an intersection, and kept driving. He was arrested for OVI.
Sorry. Hey, partner. But the first person who doesn't sin throw stones. You know, I'll get you out of here as quick as I can.
This was 2015. Hickey pleaded no contest to OVI. Sheriff Jim Neal did not suspend him.
Nobody's hurt.
Hickey is one of 5 Hamilton County Sheriff's deputies who have been charged with OVI since Sheriff Neal took office in 2013. One of them was suspended. 4 received written reprimands, a low-level disciplinary action that doesn't require unpaid time off. 3 deputies have been charged with OVI twice.
Let me see your hand.
Corrections Sergeant Justin Hunt was arrested just a few weeks ago on his second OVI charge within the last 3 years. His citation shows he was going 78 miles an hour, 23 over the speed limit.
Come on. Come on.
Hunt has pleaded not guilty. The sheriff's office has not disciplined him yet. Corrections Officer Walter Brown and Enforcement Officer Donald Four have also been charged twice with OVI. Both were convicted of OVI for their second arrest. Sheriff Neal did not suspend them. In 2015, following Four's OVI conviction, parking lot surveillance cameras videotaped him at the sheriff's office in Anderson Township. Records show he was intoxicated, pulled up a parking space bumper, cursed and chest bumped a higher-ranking officer. After being ordered to leave, he returned and punched 2 walls inside the building. An internal affairs investigation found Four's actions could have supported a criminal charge. Four wasn't charged. The sheriff suspended him, and Four received treatment for alcohol addiction. Last fall, Four's supervisor said his improvement has been remarkable.
It's surprising that you found so many cases of employees that have violated the law, especially involving alcohol.
Jeff Whitty is a 35-year law enforcement veteran, a retired Woodlawn police chief, and a volunteer for Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Whitty says when police are arrested for OVI, they should be suspended.
This is very concerning to me.
The I-Team also showed Whitty sheriff's records that reveal Corrections Officer Kenneth Payne drove to work intoxicated twice in 2015. Payne was not charged in those incidents. Payne was suspended for 3 days for the second incident, placed on administrative leave, and received treatment for alcoholism. After that, records show Payne failed to report for work and blamed a relapse for it. A supervisor called Payne a huge liability, adding that it may be in the best interest of the department to terminate his employment. Instead, the sheriff gave Payne a 3-day paper suspension. 7 months after that, records show Payne was intoxicated at work for a third time and was suspended for 10 days.
It was difficult to go through and look at this.
A year ago at Froggy's in Monroe, Deputy Bobby Caldwell told police he was intoxicated, disorderly, and had 2 knives, and that they should arrest him. One officer told Caldwell an arrest would hurt Caldwell's law enforcement career as a Hamilton County deputy. But according to the police report, Caldwell said, "It's Hamilton County. I won't get fired." Caldwell was arrested, booked into the Butler County Jail, and pleaded guilty to disorderly conduct. The sheriff did not suspend him.
So that about sums it all up, I think.
Christine Cole, a nationally recognized criminal justice researcher and consultant, reviewed Sheriff's Office disciplinary records provided by the I-Team.
It sends a message that you can do anything you want and nothing bad will happen.
During the last 2 months, the I-Team made 6 attempts to get an interview with Sheriff Neal, providing specific cases and even questions. He declined and issued a brief statement saying that he takes discipline seriously and believes the sheriff's office reaches the appropriate level of discipline. Why don't you sit down and talk to us about the way you discipline officers?
You've been provided with a comment.
On Monday, we made one more attempt to interview the sheriff after he met with the Hamilton County Commission. Sheriff, you have 2 officers who have been charged with OVI twice. You refuse to suspend them. Why?
You've been provided with a comment.
We followed Sheriff Neal down 5 flights of stairs.
You've been provided with a comment.
And out the door. Sheriff, why don't you sit down and talk to us about these decisions that you've made, why you made them, and why you think this was in the best interest of not only the sheriff's office, but people in Hamilton County. Why won't you do that?
I provided you with a comment on the matter.
It's really hard for the community to trust the police if the police can't even trust the system in which they work to be consistent and just and have integrity. And it seems to me that there's a lack of that in this agency.
I provided you with a comment.
But Sheriff Neal was consistent with his response to our questions.
I provided you with a comment.
He gave the same answer 16 times in a row. Sheriff, are you going to say anything today other than you provided me with a comment?
I did. I provided you with a comment.
The I-Team has investigated more than 2,000 incidents involving hundreds of police and corrections officers from 40 local police departments. One of our goals is to examine how local police departments police their own and what happens to officers who violate policy and, in some cases, the law. Michael Holloway has worked hard to hide his pain.
I took 3 or 4 days off work after it happened.
Holloway says the chronic pain in his injured arm and spine got worse soon after he arrived at the Middletown jail in February of last year. He was greeted by Corrections Officer Calvin McIntosh, who had 28 use-of-force incidents in the last 4 years, more than double the total of the other 9 corrections officers combined.
He said, I am the effing law.
Holloway would become number 29. Holloway arrived at the jail after being arrested on a warrant for a petty theft charge. On the video, you can see McIntosh's hand near Holloway's injured neck, his other hand pulling back on Holloway's shirt. Holloway says it was extremely painful.
It's not right. That was BS that I went through.
Then, according to an internal police investigation, McIntosh pushed Holloway into the cell door and into the cell. In the cell off camera, Holloway says McIntosh punched him several times in his neck and injured spine.
It hurt bad enough I was crying. You know, I mean, it literally put me in tears, put me to my knee.
According to the jail video, McIntosh was in the cell alone with Holloway for 25 seconds. When he left, McIntosh slammed the door so hard it bounced back.
I'm thinking if I do anything at that time, my life's in danger.
A Middletown police internal investigation concluded Holloway never resisted McIntosh, was no threat to the officer, and that McIntosh used unreasonable force. The police department determined McIntosh was guilty of administrative charges of conduct unbecoming and courtesy. The police department suspended him for a day and allowed McIntosh to use holiday pay so he wouldn't lose any money. The year before, he was also reprimanded for his use of force.
It's an outrage. What he did, he should have been charged with an assault with intent, because he did everything he could to make sure that I was in pain and make sure that I was hurting.
How do local police departments respond when their own officers are found to have violated department policy or, in some cases, the law? To answer that question, the 9 on Your Side I-Team has spent months examining internal police records we requested and obtained from 40 police departments serving the tri-state, focusing on law enforcement incidents in 7 Ohio and Kentucky counties. The I-Team discovered that not a single officer found to have used excessive force was charged or fired. In this incident at the Hamilton County Justice Center, the only use of force considered excessive was this roundhouse punch. The I-Team's investigation also found that theft, domestic violence, and assault allegations made against local police officers by their own departments were forwarded to the Hamilton County Prosecutor's Office, but no charges were filed. In one case, an officer was allowed to retire instead of facing criminal charges. As the I-Team first reported in May, Hamilton County Corrections Officer Jason Mize pushed a 61-year-old inmate headfirst into a concrete block wall a year ago, left him moaning in pain, then flung the cell door so hard it didn't close. An internal investigation found the inmate was bleeding profusely and had a broken hip.
He was facing termination. It never happened because he resigned.
The sheriff's office referred that case to the Office of Hamilton County Prosecutor Joe Dieters, which declined to present it to a grand jury.
The sheriff's office did everything they could possibly do and went through every phase of the process, and it was turned down by the prosecutor's office. I can't change that.
The Hamilton County Prosecutor's Office also declined to file charges against former Blue Ash officer Chris Zelensky and ex-Coleraine Township Sergeant Joseph Redmond, who repeatedly used a confidential police database to get personal information about people who were not under investigation. Prosecutors in Ohio and other states have filed felony charges against officers who violate that trust. But the Hamilton County Prosecutor's Office declined to file charges against both officers who were forced to resign. Redmond was an adjunct instructor at the Butler Tech Police Academy, but he resigned last week after the I-Team contacted him about this story. Back in Middletown, the I-Team showed up at a recent city council meeting after Police Chief Rodney Muterspaw and City Manager Doug Adkins canceled an on-camera interview with us. The chief wasn't there, so we approached Adkins during a break. Why did you back out of the interview?
We're not going to do this tonight.
Michael Holloway says the city of Middletown and its police department have not been held accountable for the way he was treated in jail, even denying him a copy of the investigation and how they responded to it.
There is supposed to be something in line that police is the police, but it's not working.
1 month after the incident with Michael Holloway, former Middletown Corrections Officer Calvin McIntosh got a pay raise for his continuing good performance. 5 weeks later, in April of last year, McIntosh resigned.
This is a high-speed police pursuit through the streets of Hamilton.
But the officer driving the car claimed it didn't happen.
What happened to this officer and other local police who are found to be untruthful?
For months, the 9 on Your Side I-Team investigated how local police departments police their own officers.
Last night, we revealed dozens of local officers used excessive force, but none of them were fired.
Chief investigative reporter Craig Cheatham joins us in studio right now to reveal what happens to police officers found to be dishonest.
Craig and Tanya, some police departments terminate employees who are caught lying. But in nearly 9 out of 10 cases of police officer dishonesty reviewed by the I-Team, the officers kept their jobs.
We're going southbound on Harmon. He's not stopping.
This is the pursuit Hamilton police officer Ray Nichting claimed never happened.
Turning right on the Grand. I'm not pursuing him.
But after Nichting denied on the radio that he was pursuing the suspect, he drove even faster.
Never mind.
Driving up to 82 miles an hour on city streets, Nichting passed a car after crossing yellow lines without using his lights or sirens as an oncoming vehicle approached. His actions last January, identified in a Hamilton Police Department disciplinary report, show Nichting violated 4 different general orders of the department's policy, including his actions during a pursuit the officer caught on his own dash camera, a pursuit he insisted didn't happen.
Quite frankly, I don't think the public has a lot of interest in this.
Hamilton Police Chief Craig Buchheit provided dash camera video of the incident recorded from 4 Hamilton police cars as part of the city's response to the I-Team's request for police records. We also received a disciplinary report written by Hamilton Police Lieutenant Michael Waldeck. Waldeck determined Nichting provided false information several times and didn't tell the truth until 2 weeks after the pursuit, after Nichting knew the incident was under investigation.
He was wrong. He admits that he was wrong, and he was disciplined for it.
Nichting received a written reprimand, but no suspension. Chief Buchheit blasted the I-Team for focusing on mistakes of officers instead of the good they do in the community.
When you want to drag them through the mud and rake them over the coals, I think it's shameful.
In June of last year, Middletown police officer Andrew Minnick denied using force against this man, then admitted he intentionally kicked him in the head and lied because he was afraid of losing his job. The Middletown Police Department's investigation determined Minnick violated policies for use of force and departmental reports, but not truthfulness, even though Minnick admitted lying. Minnick was suspended for 1 day. A week after the acting city manager approved the suspension for Minnick, the Middletown Police Department's Facebook page featured Minnick, saying, quote, "We are excited about the excellent job he does for MPD and our community." Middletown and Hamilton are in Butler County. Our investigation also found cases of police dishonesty in Warren and Hamilton counties. In this letter, written years ago to local police departments in Hamilton County, Prosecutor Joe Dieters recommended a strict termination policy for any officer who was found to have been untruthful in reports, testimony, or interviews. But an I-Team investigation found that local police departments rarely fire cops who are caught lying. The I-Team's investigation of 40 local police departments identified 37 employees found to be dishonest by their own department. 4 of the 37 were fired. Most were suspended. Some only received counseling.
Is honesty important? Hell yeah, it is. Absolutely it is.
Cincinnati attorney Mike Allen is a former police officer, judge, and elected county prosecutor of Hamilton County. Falsification of a police report, not being truthful to other officers who are investigating an incident that you're involved in as a police officer. How big of a deal is that?
Well, I mean, falsification of a report can be a criminal offense. It's falsification, which is a misdemeanor.
But the I-Team's investigation found no police officer from the 40 departments we examined had been charged with a crime for falsifying a report. Prosecutor Dieters also provided the I-Team with a copy of this list. It contains the names of 36 current and former police officers who the prosecutor's office determined have credibility issues that need to be disclosed to defendants as required by the courts and federal law. Most of the officers on this list are here because they lied, and most of these officers are still working for the same police departments. By examining thousands of internal police records, the I-Team uncovered more documented cases of officers who lied, but their names were not on Dieters' list. It's unclear if the police departments provided the unlisted officers' names to the prosecutor's office.
You want to focus in on what any officer has done wrong at any point in their career.
In Hamilton, Police Chief Craig Buchheit admits he did not disclose to the Butler County Prosecutor's Office that Nichting provided several false statements related to that pursuit. But the chief believes the decision to not tell the prosecutor and the discipline for Nichting were handled properly.
He was disciplined appropriately and accordingly, and we moved on.
Turning right on the Grand, I'm not pursuing him.
Hamilton police officer Ray Nichting denied it, but his own dash camera recording showed Nichting was still pursuing a suspect.
Never mind.
A Hamilton Police Department internal investigation determined Nichting drove erratically and up to 82 miles an hour on city streets while he claimed he wasn't pursuing.
Outbound on Route 4.
Hamilton Police Lieutenant Michael Waldeck concluded Nichting provided false information to the police department several times and didn't tell the truth until 2 weeks after the pursuit, after Nichting knew the incident was under investigation. For violating the pursuit policy and being untruthful, the police department gave Nichting a written reprimand.
Quite frankly, I don't think the public has a lot of interest in this.
When the I-Team interviewed Hamilton Police Chief Craig Buchheit in October, he said we were wrong to focus on the case and that he considered the matter closed.
This officer was wrong. He admitted that he was wrong, and he was disciplined appropriately and accordingly, and we moved on.
But there was one move Chief Buchheit didn't make. He never told the Butler County Prosecutor's Office that his department determined one of its own officers had been dishonest on the job.
It's something that I should know about, and I should be able to inquire about it.
Prosecutor Mike Moser learned about Nichting's dishonesty and other cases of untruthful police officers in Butler County from the 9 on Your Side I-Team. How do you feel about that?
Well, I don't like that. I don't like that.
A half-century ago, in the case of Brady versus Maryland, the Supreme Court ruled that prosecutors are required to disclose information that may hurt their own cases because it's in the interest of justice. That means Moser and other prosecutors must tell the defense if key witnesses, including police officers, have a record of dishonesty.
Do you think you've done enough to find Brady material?
No, absolutely not.
Why not?
Well, simply because I felt that I was doing everything that was necessary at the time, and I didn't have any issues with any of the cases at that time.
Moser, who has been the Butler County prosecutor since 2011, admits he hadn't asked police chiefs or the sheriff to refer possible Brady cases involving police misconduct to his office.
Why didn't you ask for this information earlier?
Well, because I have a community of police officers that I know and trust.
If that information is not given to the prosecutor and the prosecutor doesn't ask for it, and that information isn't provided to the defense, you are basically hamstringing a person's ability to defend their client.
We shared our findings with veteran criminal defense attorney Carl Lewis.
Justice isn't blind there. Justice is peaking, and it's peaking in a way to say we're not going to provide information that will be helpful to the defense, and that hurts you.
Now, one of the big questions is, did the officers with records of dishonesty provide critical testimony in cases that could now be at risk?
Every case that I have prosecuted, I am confident, had no Brady violation issues involved in them.
How do you know that?
Well, because I know every case that I've prosecuted. I deal with the police officers in those cases.
Have you reviewed those cases since we've had our conversations?
Yeah, I've reviewed those cases.
But Moser admitted he's only reviewed cases he personally prosecuted.
Moser says his office will adopt the Brady guidelines used by Hamilton County Prosecutor Joe Dieters. Dieters' policy requires police departments to inform prosecutors of an officer's use of excessive force, untruthfulness, and misconduct as it relates to his or her duties as a law enforcement officer.
I appreciate your investigation. I do understand where you have gone with that. It is one of the reasons why I am willing to expand what I am doing with respect to Brady.
Moser attached his new policy with a letter to the police chiefs and sheriff in Butler County.
It's going to make police officers more accountable and more aware of their responsibility to do the right things.
This doesn't tell the whole story.
One of Prosecutor Moser's letters was addressed to Hamilton Police Chief Craig Buchheit. In October, Buchheit told us he considered the case of Officer Ray Nichting closed.
And we've moved on.
Moser believes county prosecutors should share their Brady lists with each other. And this is one reason why. Former Colerain Township Sergeant Joe Redmond was put on the Hamilton County list, then got hired by the new Miami PD in Butler County, which doesn't have a list. Craig Cheatham, 9 on your side.